Hello, my name is Damaris Ortiz, and today I will be presenting my group's presentation on reparations for Latinos with special guest Libia Jimenez Chavez. Something that we will be addressing today in our presentation is an explanation of the moral case for and or against reparations that appeals to one of the moral theories we studied, an explanation of one specific policy that would make sense in light of that moral case, and an interview with one member of the Atlanta community whose life would be impacted by the policy that we are proposing today. The moral case for reparations that we will be addressing is: should the Latino community receive reparations? How and why? The moral theory we chose was utilitarianism, because we believe that in order to give the Latino community the reparations they deserve, we should try to increase the amount of good done towards them and end the pain and suffering. Do as much good as we can to as many people as we can, or at least not increase their suffering. Following is our interview with Libia Jimenez Chavez. All right, then. So this is our reparations interview. I'm Damaris.
I'm Brian.
I'm Jennifer.
And I'm Emily.
All right, and today we're going to be interviewing Miss Libia Jimenez Chavez. So we do have some questions for you. First, Miss Libia, can you tell us a little bit about your role at Georgia State University and in the Atlanta community?
Sure, absolutely. I'm Livia Jimenez Chavez, and I serve as the Assistant Director for LASO, also known as Latinx Student Services and Outreach. We are a student support office that is really dedicated to furthering the student success of all students at Georgia State, but particularly Latinx students is our target population. And we do this through scholarship funds, financial support, as well as cultural, academic, and social programming throughout the year to help students feel accompanied and supported throughout their time at Georgia State.
All right. Thank you so much for joining us today. We only have 5 questions for you. Feel free to answer them as honestly as you want. And I guess I'm going to start off with the first one. So, number 1 was, what do you think reparations are or should be?
Okay, sorry, it's breaking up a little bit. What do I think reparations are and what I think they should be?
Yes.
Okay, great. So I'll begin by giving you a little bit of background about myself. So I have a master's in human rights. So my perspective might be a little bit different from maybe a lawyer or a community member. But your question, the way I would answer it would really be with the human rights and, like I mentioned, international law perspective. So when we think about reparations, really what we're talking about broadly and just broad terms are really 4 areas. One of them is restitution, so restoring each victim to their original state prior to the violation. So this can be returning somebody's freedom, their liberty right if they were incarcerated, returning to their place of residence, returning their employment. We're also talking about compensation, and this is really an economic term. So when we're able to economically assess the damage, lost opportunities, lost employment, loss of education, we're talking about compensation in that reparation. And there's also rehabilitation, and this is really what it sounds like. So rehabilitation in terms of medical care, social services, legal and psychological care, again, to help the victim go back to that original state prior to the violation. And then lastly, general satisfaction. In my opinion, this is one of the most important. And that's really to help create systemic change. So implementing measures to prevent future violations, such as the verification of what really happened, of the facts, the disclosures of truth, providing answers to the damaged parties. In case of forced disappearances, helping find the bodies and giving answers to the families that were affected. So yeah, that would be my perspective, like I said, from a human rights angle.
That was a nice answer right there. My question is, what would be an example of good reparation that we can do for the Latinos?
So this question was really tough when I was thinking about it, because Latinos is so broad. We can talk about Latinos in the United States, we can talk about Latinos in Latin America, and then we can dig even deeper into countries and into situations. But one example that I wanted to share with you all is about Mexico. I don't know if you all are familiar with Ayotzinapa. 43 students that were missing or disappeared in 2015. I believe was the what. I'll have to confirm that date, but I believe it was 2015. So if you're not familiar with the case, it was a group of young teachers, so similar to your age, who were traveling in a couple of buses. They were on their way to a rally in Iguala in the state of Guerrero, again in Mexico. And on their way to the rally, they were intercepted by someone. There's still a lot of questions surrounding this case. So some people speculate that it was the Mexican army. Some people speculate that it was organized crime, or both parties working together. Not really sure the motivations why these group of students were taken from the caravan, and somehow they are no longer with us. So they were murdered. Somehow their bodies have not been found to date. There are still families that don't know where their children are. Their bodies, like I mentioned, haven't been found. There's still a lot of questions. No one has been held accountable, and no one has, come up to say I was responsible, and to begin the process of reconciliation and reparation. So that's the example that came to mind when I read that question. And then in terms of what could be a good example of a reparation, I think for me in this case, again, I wasn't directly affected by anybody, any of these students that were disappeared, the 43 students. But if I were in that situation, or even as a citizen, I think it's important that the Mexican government find answers, like who is responsible, and once that party is determined, to then go through the judicial and the legal process and make sure that there is accountability and that there is appropriate response from the government in terms of punishing that party and finding remedies for the families.
Okay, thanks for your answer. My next question is, well, when somebody thinks of reparations, they think of monetary. So do you think monetary is the best form of reparations, or are there other means that should be taken?
This goes back to my earlier answer and your earlier questions about what are reparations. So yeah, I think you're right. Like usually we think of like economics. We think like there's a lawsuit, and then a party is granted X amount of money, and that's definitely part of it. But we really need to look a little broader to see what sort of physical, emotional, psychological damage was done to the parties, because money can only do so much, I think. But really we have to look about like how was this as a human being, how were they affected, how was their family, their community affected, and even broader in terms of our citizenship in our countries, like our institutions and our legal systems, are they perpetuating future violations, or are we doing something as citizens to help remedy and to help correct so that future violations don't occur? So I definitely think that it has to go beyond economic.
Okay, Libby, thank you for that answer. My question is, do you believe that everyone in the U.S. should contribute to paying reparations, and why or why not?
I think that the primary perpetrators should be held responsible for reparations. I think it's kind of an impossible ideal to ask everybody in a country to have some sort of remedy. For instance, if we think about like Nazi Germany, or even think about slavery and the repercussions of that in our country, right? Like that would be so incredible to prove that somebody has benefited or was responsible. I think we would be in that process for a very, very, very long time. I think it makes, at least for me, more sense like to be more definite and to have the responsible party answer, and again, and holding them accountable. However, I do think that as citizens, what I mentioned earlier, right, we have a responsibility to demand this accountability and to ensure that our, again, systems, institutions, our own biases are not contributing to these violations of rights, but we're actually helping correct these wrongs from the past.
I think I'm the last one. Thank you very much for your answer. And our final question is, can we ever truly pay back what we owe to generations of people?
I'm sorry, y'all. I hate to be so redundant, but I'm going to say the same thing, right? I don't think that we can ever fully remedy wrongs, but I think that we can be optimistic and work what we're doing now and into the future to help. We can avoid committing the errors of the past.
Okay, so that's actually all the questions we had prepared. I don't know if anybody else has questions that they want to add. But as for questions that we wanted to ask you today, those were our kind of pressing matters. Are there any final thoughts that you have on the matter of reparations and how you think people should be compensated, or what groups you think should be compensated first? Is there anything else you want to add?
I don't think so. I think that's a really tough question to answer, like who should be compensated first. I don't know that we can answer that because there's so many groups, so many interests, so much damage that has occurred. I don't think it would necessarily be fair to begin with one group or another. But I mean, I think this is a great project, really interesting. I hope that you all have enjoyed kind of thinking about these bigger questions and, you know, your role in them. Like I said, mine was very like human rights, more high level, but if you were to talk to like a lawyer, I'm sure they would give you a very, probably a more concrete answer and could talk to you specifically about like, you know, the law here in the United States and what that could look like. But overall, it was great. Thanks for inviting me.
Thank you, Oliva. You were a good person to interview this for.
Thanks. I appreciate y'all. Good. Well, y'all had great questions. So I'll let you go. Have a great fall break. Get some rest. Good to see you all.
Thank you so much, Livia.
Bye. Thank you.
Thanks so
Thank you
much.
so much. Bye.
After the interview, here are our final thoughts. Reparations for Latinos need to be more than just monetary compensation. We need to see justice served for those who have been oppressed and neglected, treated as less than human. Reparations are vital for change in our communities and in the world. We need to have the right mindset to make this change happen, and reparations are needed to understand people of different backgrounds and ethnicities. Thank you for watching our presentation. We hope that you enjoyed.